What if I told you the cliffs of Milford Sound aren't just tall? They're a geological impossibility that shouldn't exist on this planet. Picture this. You're sailing through a narrow channel of dark, still water. On either side, walls of stone shoot straight up for over a mile, vanishing into low-hanging clouds. Waterfalls, hundreds of them, appear out of nowhere, cascading down like silver threads against the black rock. This is Milford Sound. But these aren't normal mountains. There's something else entirely, a landscape that breaks all the rules of geology. Most mountains slope. They have foothills, ridges, gradual inclines. But here, the rock doesn't slope, it launches. Vertical, relentless, almost arrogant in its rise from the sea. And for over a century, geologists were utterly baffled by it. Because according to every model, mountains like this simply can't form. The forces required, the specific sequence of events, it was like nature had cheated. So how did these impossible cliffs come to be? The story begins not with the rock itself, but with its total and complete absence. Close your eyes and travel back 20 million years. Where Milford Sound stands today, there was no land at all. Just the deep, cold waters of the Tasman Sea. Far below the surface, on the ocean floor, a slow-motion drama was unfolding. Two massive tectonic plates, the Pacific and the Australian, were colliding. Not in a sudden crash, but in a grinding, relentless push that lasts to this day. As they pressed together, the edge of the Pacific plate was forced downward, sliding beneath its neighbor. And as it descended into the Earth's molten mantle, something extraordinary happened. Sediment, centuries of sand, silt, and volcanic ash that had settled on the ocean floor, was scraped off, piled up, compressed. Layer upon layer, century upon century, this slurry of ocean debris was squeezed into a new kind of rock. Hard, dense, and incredibly resistant. This is the bedrock of the fiords, a stone born not from volcanoes or continental uplift, but from the ocean floor itself, resurrected. But that's only the first act, because hard rock alone doesn't make a vertical wall. For that, you need an artist. And in this story, the artist was ice. 2 million years ago, the world cooled. Ice ages gripped the planet. In New Zealand's southwest, snow began to fall, and it didn't stop. Year after year, century after century, it accumulated. It compacted into ice, and that ice began to flow. Glaciers, rivers of ice, formed in the high valleys and began carving their way toward the sea. Now, most people think glaciers carve like bulldozers, scraping and grinding. But that's not quite right. A glacier is more like a sculptor with a chisel. It doesn't just scrape, it exploits. It finds the weak points in the rock, cracks, fissures, fault lines. It widens them. It plucks entire boulders from the walls. And because this rock was so hard and fractured in just the right way, the glacier didn't carve a typical U-shaped valley. It carved a trough so steep and so deep that when the ice finally retreated, it left behind not a slope, but a sheer face. A cliff that drops straight into the sea. But here's the twist. The cliffs of Milford Sound are still being carved, right now, because the ice may be gone, but the water remains. This part of New Zealand is one of the wettest places on Earth. It rains almost constantly, and all that rain does two things. First, it seeps into the rock. It freezes in cracks overnight, expanding, prying the stone apart grain by grain. This process, called frost wedging, is constantly weakening the rock face. And second, all that water has to go somewhere. It flows over the surface, gathering into those legendary temporary waterfalls. And as it falls, it doesn't just erode the rock, it polishes it. It strips away soil, vegetation, everything soft, leaving behind that stark, gleaming black surface. That's why the cliffs look so severe. They're being sandblasted by rain and scoured by waterfalls in a cycle that never ends. But the most astonishing part isn't how the cliffs were formed, it's what's happening to them now. Because these vertical walls aren't stable. They're constantly collapsing. Rockfalls are a daily occurrence. You might hear a low rumble and see a plume of dust across the water, another piece of the mountain giving way. And this is where the story turns upside down. In most places, erosion wears mountains down over millions of years. But at Milford Sound, the opposite is happening. The same tectonic forces that lifted the rock in the first place are still pushing it upward, faster than erosion can wear it down. So these cliffs aren't just being preserved, they're still growing, still rising out of the sea, still defying gravity. That means the impossible cliffs you see today might be even taller in 1,000 years. They're a landscape in motion, a work in progress shaped by ice, water, and the restless earth below. And when you stand in their shadow, you're not just looking at ancient history. You're witnessing a planet still building its most dramatic monuments. If you could explore one impossible landscape on Earth, where would it be? Let me know in the comments. Your answer might just become our next Wonder Explorer adventure.